Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, I know this is a mess up here. All right, next episode, 30 Years War. All you guys on the Gulf Coast, I hope you're doing all right, especially those of you, if any of you guys are in Louisiana. Hope you're doing okay. All right, if you're new to the channel, hello, my name is Connor. I like to learn about history through YouTube recommendations. Ooh, I'm wearing a Rhode Island shirt. Rhode Island, best state in the Union. Prove me wrong. Yeah, I'd love for you to join the channel. The original link to the video will be at the top of the description below. Right below that will be the link to the Discord. Helps me create the atmosphere I want to create around YouTube and Discord, or around history on YouTube and Discord. Love to have you. Join the family. Pull up a chair. We're nice usually. Okay. Let's do it. If you're not ready to learn, get out. Let's go.
The epic Battle of Freiburg in 1644 showed that the Holy Roman Empire still had enough strength to defend against the Franco-Swedish alliance. But the empire was getting low on resources, their allies were leaving their cause, and their enemies were on all sides. A new Swedish offensive in 1645 proved able to push the Habsburgs to their limit.
No more
as the brilliant
Gustavus.
commander Lennart Torstensson was eager to outshine even his late king Gustavus Adolphus. The Battle of Jankau was a great chance to prove if Torstensson had what it takes to do just that. Although the Bavarian leader prevailed in the Battle of Freiburg...
Okay, yeah, I got the Spanish and Bavarians mixed up the last episode, or 2 episodes ago. I don't know.
Using his defensive skills, Mercy's indecisiveness gave the French commanders the opportunity to recall most of the nearby garrisons, and within 24 hours, more than 6,000 men were marching to join them. The Bavarian commander probably knew that the enemy would be shortly reinforced and decided to retreat. His army still lacked horses, so retreating into the open would have been dangerous. Simultaneously, the French might have gone for Mannheim or Stuttgart, and losing these cities wasn't an option. As a result, on the 7th, Mercy moved to a more defensible St. Peter Valley. The French received their reinforcements the next day, and started chasing the Imperials on the 9th. However, due to lack of knowledge of the terrain, the French advance was slow, so Condé sent General Rosen and his cavalry to cut the Bavarian retreat. On the 10th, Rosen almost succeeded in doing that, but the slowness of the extremely tired French infantry didn't allow Condé to build on Rosen's actions. By the end of the day, Mercy broke through the French cavalry and was in Villingen. Condé stayed in the area for a day, taking the imperial outposts, and as Freiburg's strategic importance was lower than that of the regions of Baden and Württemberg, the French began their march north. Mercy changed his trajectory and started moving parallel to them. However, he was still wary of the enemy cavalry, and therefore moved with caution. This meant that he was too far away to do anything when Condé besieged Philipsburg on the 25th of August and took it on September 12th. This threatened Stuttgart and Mannheim, which forced Mercy to get closer to the French and start building fortifications at Neckarsul. Condé possibly thought about attacking, but winter was coming, so the campaign of 1644 was over. To the north, Torstensson was preparing for the campaign of 1645. He now had around 16,000 troops and an agreement with the French and Transylvanians to attack Vienna together, while the Protestant minority in Upper Austria was asked to revolt. It was expected that this...
So I'm starting to get a little worried about getting lost in the moment and not realizing the bigger picture. Okay, so clearly the Catholic side of the war was doing great in the beginning, and Protestants pushed back. They had the Danes and the Swedes had some beef together, but they were both on the side of the Protestants. Sweden did a very good job pushing into the continent. Gustavus died. It looks like the Protestants were really getting an upper hand. And then last episode, the Catholics were doing a bit better. And you had France and Spain fighting each other, France defeating them, and then going further into Germany, modern-day Germany, and fighting the Bavarians. I just want to take a breather there. Okay.
With the French 5. He now had around 16,000 troops and an agreement with the French and Transylvanians to attack Vienna together, while the Protestant minority in Upper Austria was asked to revolt. It was expected that this four-pronged attack would finally break Habsburg resistance. The empire's situation was dire. Denmark left the war and was negotiating with Sweden for a future treaty, which meant Torstenson was free to attack. Gallus's action basically destroyed the imperial army in the area, so the new commander Hatzfeld had to rebuild it from scratch. Reinforcements from Bohemia, Hungary and Silesia brought his numbers to 12,000, but those were untrained and badly equipped troops, so Hatzfeld asked the emperor for more troops. Ferdinand III pleaded with Bavarian Elector Maximilian I to help, and the latter sent a letter to Mercy ordering him to send a portion of his force. Indeed, General Werth and his 5,000 soon joined Hatzfeld at Pilsen, where the new imperial commander was trying to weld his soldiers into a real army. However, Torstenson wasn't going to give his foes the time they needed, and began his campaign months earlier than expected, on January 19th. The Swedes moved into Bohemia via Pretznitz 5 days later, completely surprising Hatzfeld and crushing a few of his outposts in the process. Unfortunately for Torstenson, he fell ill, which slowed down the advance. That and the thawing allowed the Imperials to somewhat recover. Still, when the Swedes passed them from the east on the 18th of February, Hatzfeld was in a difficult position, as Torstenson could have attacked either Prague or Vienna. It became clear that the Swedish commander was going for the capital of the empire, and Hatzfeld force-marched his men south, managing to reach the town of Horeș-Devița first on the 25th. This allowed him to secure the crossings of the Votava River. For 4 days straight, the Swedes attempted to cross by attacking head-on and by attempting a feigned retreat, but nothing worked, so on March 2nd, Torstenson moved west, which made the Imperials abandon their positions and pursue him. Once again, the Swedes were slower, as Hatzfeld double-timed his soldiers to take positions at Tabor. Indeed, on the 4th of March, the tired Imperial army was in the town with the Swedes to the northwest. With no time to lose, Hatzfeld moved to the north again, this time establishing a defensive position near the village of Jankau. Soon, Torstenson was in the area. At this point in the—
I just want to say a lot of respect gained for Sweden. I also have to watch the Great Northern War, but I just never viewed Sweden as a major I didn't know that they were ever this dominant on the European mainland, able to muster a force. And not only that, but a really good one that's powerful. And that's a big thing I've learned this series.
The war, both armies liked to send cavalry detachments to
very
raid
confusing
and counter-raid.
series, but
so
I
when
feel like
large
I'm getting it pretty
concentrations
well.
happened, the armies were unusually cavalry heavy. The Imperials had 11,000 horsemen across 50 squadrons and 5,000 footmen in 6 brigades, supported by 26 guns. Although the Swedish army was similar in terms of the numbers, it was far superior in terms of training, equipment, unit cohesion, and most importantly, unlike Hatzfeld, Torstenson had the complete obedience of his subordinates. The latter also had artillery advantage with 60 guns, alongside 6,000 infantry in 8 brigades and 10,000 cavalry in 47 squadrons.
I just want to say, there had to have been a bunch of Swedish conflicts in order. There's no way that a nation just gets a very disciplined army out of nowhere. it has to go through a lot of war in order to get to that point. And so I'm wondering what those conflicts were before this that made the Swedish army so ready to go.
On the afternoon of the 5th of March, the Swedish army approached the Kotishenka River. Their commander ascended to the top of Hill 554 to observe the enemy. His counterpart occupied a great defensive position among the hills and woods, which limited the Swedish artillery advantage and made any frontal cavalry charge impossible, so Torstensson had to think of a better plan. Around 5 a.m. the next morning, part of his right-wing cavalry joined him on the hill and then turned left and started marching north. Hatzfeld was informed of this and deduced that although his left flank was more vulnerable, the Swedes would attack from his right. Meanwhile, the rest of the Swedish army reformed in the dark into columns, with infantry on the left, cavalry in the center, and guns and baggage on the right, and started moving to the south. Swedish cavalry to the north was making much more noise, but Hatzfeld was still not sure about his left flank. The highest elevation in the area was Chapel Hill to the southwest of his position, and the Imperial leader probably wanted to use this high ground to get a better idea of what the Swedes were up to. However, it is not clear if the commander of the left wing, Gotz, was ordered to move his entire force to occupy Chapel Hill, or just create a forward outpost there. Hatzfeld himself went to his right flank to conduct a personal reconnaissance, which basically left his army leaderless. Gotz either misunderstood the directive or decided that it was a good moment to show his disobedience, so he started moving the first echelon of the Imperial left towards Chapel Hill. While most of the troops marched slowly, the dragoons were double-timed with orders to occupy the elevation. They established themselves on the hill, but around 7:30 a.m. the Swedish vanguard was in the area, and the dragoons fled without offering any resistance, soon informing Gotz. The latter concluded that his foes were trying to get their own forward outpost and continued towards Chapel Hill. Simultaneously, Hatzfeld finally started to understand that Torstensson had tricked him and no attack was coming from the right. He personally galloped towards Gotz to inform him that the Swedes would attack from the south or southwest, but when he reached the left flank, he only found the second echelon under Pompei, and these troops were also going for the elevation. Enraged, the Imperial commander rode to find Gotz. Although Gotz moved fast, he didn't scout the terrain ahead, and had no idea that the Swedes had already formed up on the hill and to the west of it. At 8:15, he ended up around the village of Nozakov, and almost immediately his disjointed units were attacked by the enemy. That was the moment when Hatzfeld at last found his unruly underling. Gotz was ordered to retreat, but began to argue and insisted that they needed to retake Chapel Hill. It is not clear if Hatzfeld was persuaded or just...
It's good to have second opinions a lot of times, but in a time like this, there's a reason there's only one pope, you know? There's a reason that ships set sail with one captain. And difference of opinion is good, but in times like this, you need one person to call the shots, and they are not in a good position.
Decided that the only way to save his wayward left was to bring the whole army to the area, but he started galloping towards his main forces. Gotz's troops were attacking, but these attacks...
Maybe the Pope example wasn't the best, but I think the captain of the ship was a good one.
Gotz's troops were
That's
attacking,
from Oscar in The
but
Office.
these attacks were disorganized and easily repelled by the Swedes. As their artillery arrived at Chapel Hill, they started sending deadly volleys against the Imperials. Ever stubborn, Gotz refused to retreat, and his charismatic personality held his troops together for some time, despite all the losses. However, around 9 a.m., Gotz was killed by musket fire, and that broke his troops. Swedish cavalry started pursuing them, but by that time, the Imperial footmen under Zuis were able to form a defensive line in the woods to the south of Nozakov. the cavalry charge was repelled, but as Zeus's infantry had to move fast, they left their artillery behind, and now were under withering artillery fire from the Swedes. Unlike Gotz, Zeus wasn't too proud to retreat, and quickly repositioned in the forest to the northeast. Torstensson smelled blood and was eager to destroy the enemy here and now, so he sent part of the cavalry to take Hill 535, which threatened the south of the Imperial infantry. Fortunately for the latter, Hatzfeld soon arrived and reformed what remained of Gotz's cavalry. He then repositioned to the south of Zeus just in time to repel the first attack by the Swedish squadrons.
I almost feel like this should be called the Battle of Novikov.
Repel the first attack by the Swedish squadrons. Now that the entirety of Torstensson's army was between Chapel Hill and Hill 535, he attacked Zeus head-on and reinforced his right flank to push Hatzfeld, who was in turn reinforced by Wirth's left flank cavalry. The initial Swedish attack in the center was repelled, as part of Wirth's cavalry charged from the flank, but the Swedes continued, and slowly but surely, the Imperials were pushed back by their superior arms and guns. It was impossible for Hatzfeld to continue his resistance, so by noon, he ordered the army to disengage and retreat to the
Someone
north.
tell me, I'm almost starting to get frustrated. Where did Sweden get all of this stuff? Were they warring for hundreds of years before this, and they fine-tuned everything, and they got their organization perfect and superior cavalry or firepower and everything? There's no way they just
north. Although the Swedes attempted to chase their foe, Wirth managed to use his cavalry to expertly cover the escape. The Swedes showed their excellent discipline and formed up in their initial alignment with cavalry on the wings and with the center consisting of infantry and cavalry. They captured some of the artillery lost by the enemy and placed it on Hill 537 alongside their own, with the baggage train behind the main army. Despite the fact that his army was clearly the winner of the battle, Torstensson wasn't eager to chase the enemy across broken terrain, so he decided to allow the Imperials to flee. Meanwhile, Hatzfeld was worried that his battered army would not survive a fighting retreat, so he was going to wait until sunset in order to avoid the Swedes. To that end, his troops formed up between Jankau and Herzin, where he had previously erected 1-meter-high fortifications. On the left, he had Wirth's mostly intact Bavarian cavalry, with Bruy commanding whatever was left of Gotz's cavalry and the 2nd Echelon cavalry from the center on the right, with an infantry brigade joining them. In the center, he positioned 5 infantry brigades and Kallenberg's Saxon cavalry reserve alongside his artillery. He now had just 9 guns and had no chance to survive any artillery duel, so he hoped the uneven forest terrain would cover his army. The Imperials also claimed Hill 548 as a forward outpost. The Swedish commander learned about the new Imperial disposition and concluded that he couldn't leave a strong enemy in his rear and march for Prague or Vienna, so around 1 p.m. he sent 400 musketeers with 10 cannons to take Hill 548. The German infantry unit occupying it retreated without offering any resistance. Hatzfeld rebuked Zeus and Bruy for allowing it to happen. After ordering them to retake the hill, he returned to Herzin. And once again, his instructions were misunderstood, and his captains sent almost their entire force to take the hill, a disproportionate response that took them out of their great defensive position, to say the least. Obviously, this counterattack succeeded, and the Imperials drove back the musketeers and captured all 10 guns. However, this action showed Torstensson that the enemy was still in the area in full force. He immediately sent his left under Douglas and center under Mortenia, while Wittenberg's right was left as the reserve, with guns on Hill 537 providing artillery support. Indeed, the fact that the Swedes had artillery on that hill was a great surprise for the Imperials. Artillery just wasn't as mobile during that period, and the fact that it was moved into new positions so quickly proved the professionalism of the Swedish army. Torstensson was adding a new military tactic that would become key in the next centuries. For the Imperials, this professionalism meant death, as Swedish artillery killed hundreds with each volley, especially among the Imperial right.
Just take over all of Europe, Sweden. You're so good.
Indeed, when Douglas's horse attacked here, they easily dispersed the enemy, breaking them and sending them into full flight, while Bry was killed. The Swedes weren't as successful in the center, as the high ground allowed the Imperial footmen to dig in, and the guns they had captured were effective, so Mortenya's charge here was stopped, and the two sides were then locked in a bitter melee. The Imperial left flank was relatively unscathed, and was ordered to attack Torstensson's right side. Wittenberg didn't expect this attack, and it took his troops by surprise. Most of the first echelon was routed, while the second was now chased by Wirth, who was probably eager to destroy.
Hold on, sorry.
To attack.
I've been good at not rewinding.
In a bitter melee. The Imperial left flank was relatively unscathed, and was ordered to attack Torstensson's right side. Wittenberg didn't expect this attack, and it took his troops by surprise. Most of the first echelon was routed, while the second was now chased by Wirth, who was probably eager to destroy it and then swing back north. During the chase, the Swedes retreated close to their baggage train, and that was too tempting for the Imperial troops. They allowed the Swedes to slip away and started looting. The wives of the Swedish officers were captured here, including Torstensson's wife. Eventually, 5 squadrons attempted to continue the chase, but by that time the Swedes had reformed their ranks. Their counterattack began around 2:30 and was fast and furious. The Bavarians didn't expect that and were completely routed in a matter of minutes.
Speaking from today's lens, but the wives and everything, clearly there are human emotions back then, and I don't know why. First, I was surprised why Sweden wouldn't fight to the death over those carriages, because seemingly some family members were there, and then the Germans were surprised that the Swedish came back. Okay.
This proved to be too much to the least disciplined part of the Imperial army. The Saxons just recently joined the Habsburg cause and just weren't as invested. Immediately after the left wing was crushed, Kallenberg ordered his horsemen to leave the field, abandoning Zeus's infantry to their fate. Hatzfeld's only remaining cavalry attempted to wheel around the center and attack the Swedish center from behind, but Mortenya had enough reserves to block them, and soon Douglas sent reinforcements who crushed this detachment. Hatzfeld's infantry was surrounded on Hill 548. Although they managed to defend for an hour, soon it was all over. The battle was very bloody, and the winners lost 2,000 dead and as many wounded, while the Imperial casualties were more than 10,000, half of them prisoners, including Hatzfeld and many other officers. The inability of the Imperial commanders to strike an accord, alongside the superiority of the Swedish troops and officers, proved to be too much for the Habsburg army to overcome. The road to the Habsburg capital was open, with Torstensson seemingly closer to complete victory than his late king Gustavus Adolphus ever was. But not everything was so simple, and our next episode will prove it. So make sure you are subscribed to our channel and have pressed the bell button.
Awesome episode. I don't know how Sweden is so good, but they clearly are. He just hinted that they're going to have some problems next episode. I'm ready for that. I'm going to do the another armchair historian video, D-Day from the German perspective. Hope you're all doing well. If you're not, that sucks. You'll be good soon. Don't worry. See you next time.